Friday, tomorrow we'll
Oh, cool.
All right, we have the recording going, John.
All right. Understanding the whole.
And if you're in that general, well, I think he told you last time, probably you'll be on camera.
Hopefully I can get it all.
There you go.
Yes, it's going.
All right, everybody, welcome back after lunch. Hopefully everybody had a good meal, some caffeine, ready to go.
Perfect on time.
All right, so let's talk now about live response. So what happens when you come into a scene, office, wherever, and you come across a running computer? Happens a good bit. Not every system you're going to encounter is going to be powered down. So what do you do? How do you address that? And it's definitely a big change from a live system to a dead system. So what exactly can we do? What do we do? First off, let me preface all this. The decision that you make at that scene with that running computer is going to have a huge impact down the road. It can be a total game-changing event, how you handle that computer when it's on for down the road for court, attribution, whatever you're going to do, the investigation. How you handle that running machine can have a huge impact. It can affect the integrity of the evidence. Again, the integrity of the evidence from a forensic perspective is always paramount. We always want to do our absolute best, all right, to preserve the integrity of the evidence, although to varying degrees depending on the scenario. Sometimes we can make a change. We just have to document that we've done that and how we did it and why we did it. It can also impact the conclusions that you make. Again, we're trying to get that accurate result, answer those questions, and those actions that you take, the documentation that you create at that time, can have a positive or negative impact on the conclusions that you're going to be able to draw from the evidence you collect from that running machine. It can definitely impact the admissibility of the evidence that you collect. Okay? It can definitely impact the admissibility of the evidence you collect from a court of law perspective. So when do we conduct a live response? All right. Nearly all intrusion investigations, all right. We're going to be doing these same methodologies for almost all intrusion investigations, but also for you guys that work in another context, criminal, what have you. Anytime you come across a running machine, these protocols and this process we're going to run through is going to be applicable. Some factors to consider. All right. If you've got reason to believe that you've got evidence in the volatile memory of the machine, this is when you want to execute these techniques. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's unpack that a minute. What kind of things live in RAM? What?
Encryption keys.
Encryption keys, absolutely. What else?
Credentials.
Say again?
Credentials.
Credentials, okay, good. What else?
Active network connections.
Active network connections. Okay, what else?
Running processes.
Running processes, all kinds of things like that. Big, broad categories of potential evidence. So you have to know what you're looking for. If you have an idea, why am I there? What am I investigating? For example, it may be that you're talking about, you're really interested in, let's say, internet chat, for whatever reason. Some of the artifacts that are created, all right, in these systems, depending on the technology that you're using, is never written to disk. Never sees the disk, never hits the disk. It only exists in RAM. So if you go ahead and go old school and pull the plug, that evidence is gone and gone forever. All right, so you need to really understand why you're there and what kind of evidence you're after and where that evidence is likely to be, whether it's going to be written to that disk or not. Malware. You guys have probably all heard the old saying that malware can hide, but it has to run. What does that mean? You guys heard that before? Malware can hide, but it has to run. What does that mean? It means it's got to be in RAM. It's got to go to the RAM. It's got to live in RAM. It can only execute when it's in RAM. So a lot of this more sophisticated malware can actually clean up after itself on the disk. There's a lot of really clever, ingenious ways of making itself hard to find. So your best chance of seeing it, okay, is going to be in that volatile memory. Can live response be done while minimizing the changes? The answer is yes. All right. The answer is yes. So one of the other things to think about is, typically when you look at a dead box, we're talking about that forensic imaging process. Some of you guys mentioned before, how long did it take to clone some drives? We had 3 weeks? Weeks. So do we have that kind of time? Probably not. Probably not, all right? So there again is another reason why this live response could be applicable. Too many systems to forensically image. You have other legal reasons to preserve as much data as possible. What scenario might that be? Anybody have a guess at that one? What legal scenario, what legal reason might we have to preserve as much data as possible?
Legal hold.
Legal hold. Okay, good. Can you give me a scenario maybe when that would be?
Termination.
Perfect. Termination. So from a civil litigation perspective, when is the duty to preserve triggered? Anybody know?
During legal hold, once it's been signed up.
It's actually prior to that. There is.
Based on retention, maybe.
Actually, there is case law there. This is where it gets scary because this is hard to really. There's no bright line. It's actually the duty to preserve triggers when you've got a reasonable anticipation of litigation. What is that?
That changed per state, obviously.
It changes per state. It changes per situation. It changes. I mean, that's like nailing Jill over the wall. I mean, everybody wants a clearly defined set of this, then that, but that legal trigger, that's not that. You know what I mean? That's not. We're not going to get, at least we don't have right now, a clearly defined bright line of this is exactly what it's going to take to trigger my duty to preserve. So this reasonable anticipation of litigation, that could be when somebody's terminated, but that can also be in other instances. But it's not. Don't get hung up on the fact that I've got to have a piece of paper hit my desk to trigger that legal requirement. It's not. Okay? It is not. So if you've got other legal reason, for example, that you've got that reasonable anticipation of litigation, you think there's a possibility that whatever this scenario is, could result in litigation, then you're going to want to escalate that to do a full forensic image. Then I would suggest pulling the drive out of the machine, put a new one in, go on. But you can get in a big trick bag of trouble if you don't preserve that evidence on these civil cases. There are massive damages out there. So if you're in the private sector and involved in e-discovery, you got to make sure that that you are preserving. It's better to have more, have and not need, than need and not have. It can cost some serious dollars. Have you tested your live response process? This is something you don't want to be practicing the day of, right? You don't want to be practicing this the day of. You don't want to test your tools the day of. You don't want to test that process the day of. Another question to ask is this target system functioning properly? Is there some kind of an issue with the system to make it less stable? That can also impact this decision. Is that system running properly? If it crashes, if I'm doing my live system response, interacting with the machine, and it crashes, what is the potential effect? What's the outcome? What happens if all that data goes away? It may not be worth the risk. Have you communicated your plan with all the stakeholders? Have you told the lawyers involved? Have you told your supervisors that you're going to do this live system response? And as always, there is a little bit of a risk. There is a risk involved with this, and things are going to, from a strict, old-school forensic perspective, you're going to make some changes to the system, okay? But the key is you're not going to make any changes that's going to compromise the evidence, all right? So what we're talking about here is an actual graceful shutdown of the machine. We're just going to document the heck out of that process, but we're going to do a graceful shutdown of the machine, all right, in essence. And we're going to collect that volatile data. So make sure that's something you want to communicate up front to make sure that those folks understand exactly what it is that you're doing and what those changes may be and the risks involved. So who are these stakeholders? Okay. I'm talking about the lawyers, again, the management, etc. So it's impossible to interact with that live machine, okay, without making some kind of change. If that system is on, things are changing. Not my computer right now running is making changes. All right, it is true, but it's probably not making it. It's likely not some kind of change that's impacting the evidence. depending on what context we're talking about. Okay, so those changes can be happening, but it may not impact things from a forensic perspective. But when that system is on, things are changing. Shutting it down makes changes. Booting the system makes changes. We can't avoid that. But it's not that old school thing we talked about where it's yank the plug. We don't want to do anything with that system is going to put that evidence at risk. That's not necessarily the case. That's a too narrow, too constraining perspective on this, especially given the technology we're working with today and the value of that volatile memory from an evidentiary standpoint. So we know that shutting that machine down is going to destroy that evidence that's in memory. Can't get around it. Cannot avoid that. When the power goes, that data that's in that volatile memory is going to dissipate. It's not a matter of it being gone instantly. It sort of fades out. But it's going to go away. So key here, as always, anytime we're going to interact with this running system, right? Anytime we're going to interact with a running machine, our sole objective is to minimize the changes and minimize the interaction with that device. So we're always thinking that's the key operative word there is minimize. So what exactly is in volatile, or what is volatile memory? All right, you guys all know this, I'm sure. It's basically a temporary holding space for data. Okay, temporary holding space for data. All the data that we have stored on our drive, right? It's anything that's going to get worked on or operated or opened or processed has got to move first into RAM, or the volatile memory. Programs and data used by the computer must first be loaded into RAM. Must first be loaded into RAM, or memory. So, data is stored, when it's not being used on our disk, when the machine's booted up or the program is opened, loaded into RAM, then sent to the CPU for processing. That's a very, very simplified version of what's going on. So volatile memory, that's part of that. Volatile data versus non-volatile data. All right. So what is volatile data? Basically, we're talking about data that is easily destroyed or is destroyed when the power is removed. Volatile data is data that is destroyed when the power is removed. So that volatile data requires power. Requires power to maintain that stored information. So once that data is gone, there is no getting that back. That is one of the absolutes in this process. Volatility. It's a measure of how perishable that data is. The volatility is the measure of how perishable that data is. You've never heard of the order of volatility? Have you heard of that? So not only are we aware that there's volatile data in the system, but there is this order of volatility, from most volatile to least volatile. So in the realm of data, all right, there's going to be, got done one. In the realm of data, okay, there's going to be data that we're going to want to get to first, and data that we can get to after that. So basically, it's a priority. What this order of volatility does, it establishes data that is the most perishable, the data that is the least perishable, and that's going to provide for us a priority of what data we want to collect first. So we want to get to that most volatile data first. What do you think is the most volatile data on a running system? Where is it located? What is the most volatile, the most sensitive, you think? You got a guess? Cache. What kind of cache? CPU cache. Very good. CPU cache. How many forensic tools are out there to grab the CPU cache?
I'm sure some instruction set out there.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, that's a high bar.
It's going to be per architecture.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be rough. So that may. I've never seen anybody do it in the field. It may happen. I've not seen a tool for it. That's not something that's done every day. So that's going to be. I think it's going to require a pretty sophisticated skill set, tool set. So we want to go from that most volatile to the least volatile. So what do you think is the least volatile?
Hard drive.
Hard drive?
CD-ROM.
CD-ROM?
Paper.
Paper. There you go. Good. Analog. Excellent. The old analog stuff. Good. All right. So registers and cache. Routing tables, process tables, kernel statistics, and memory. This is most volatile to least volatile. Temporary file systems. Disks or other storage media. Remote logging and monitoring data that is related or significant to the system in question. Physical system and network topology. So that's the 6 kind of tiers, if you will, of the order of volatility. And then last but not least, 7, the archival data, archival media. All right, 3 big reasons why we want to capture that volatile data. Passwords, all right, passwords are going to be in the clear in that volatile memory. Anti-forensics, all right, and then malware evidence. Malware evidence is going to be there big time. Sophisticated malware can leave no trace. Does a really good job of cleaning up after itself, making it very difficult to find on a disk, on an image of a disk. Another thing we need to be aware of: how many critical systems exist in your all's organizations that cannot be shut down? Probably got a lot. You can imagine. All right, probably have a lot. There's probably going to be some systems in your organizations that cannot be shut down, which is going to necessitate a live response. The other thing you've got a problem with is the liability for data loss. You guys are doing this as a third party. You're doing an investigation. You've got some legal recourse to be there and doing that, and you're on somebody else's system. You could have some serious liability for data loss if you do this wrong. All right, so you've got to be. This is where you've got to tread lightly and have your ducks in a row before you try to execute this plan. All right, some basic forensic principles or rules to live by in a live system response. First, we want to, just like the doctors are supposed to do, we want to do no harm. In other words, we don't want to compromise that evidence if we don't have to. Probably going to have to change some things, but again, we want to have in our head what are we after and where is that most likely to live. Okay, where's that data that we're after and where is it most likely to be found on the system in question? So then we can kind of structure our response and make smart choices about where to interact and how to interact with that system. So we always want to do no harm, change no evidence, but we're going to change some things. All right? You want to use always the least intrusive method possible. What is the least intrusive method that I can use that's going to maintain the integrity of the evidence the best that I can and still allow me to retrieve that data? There may be more than one way to do it, all right? Maybe more than one way to do it, but we want to think about the process, how that it works, and we always want to pick the least intrusive method possible. We got to be able to account, general terms here, of all the system changes that we make. That doesn't necessarily mean process by process and every single keystroke down to the finite level, all right? But we got to have a really good idea of what we're doing and why that it's forensically sound and why that it's not compromising the evidence, all right? And we need to be able to articulate that, okay, to a judge, a jury, a lawyer, customer, etc. There can be a lot of stuff in play here. A lot of the risk can be high doing this kind of response. So as seen, what do we collect first? All right. Again, the old school, yanking the plug. Walk in, no questions asked. Don't worry about anything. Just pull the plug. And that right there will shut down the system, obviously, and that shuts down the argument that we've changed anything. Right? We pulled the power, have not interacted with it. I didn't touch the keyboard. I didn't touch the mouse. I simply pulled the plug, and it is what it is. But that definitely ignores the obvious problem with is all the valuable data and all the valuable evidence that could potentially be in RAM. Right? So that totally ignores that. So we want to get to the next level of this. We want to get new school, not old school. All right? So what you want to do is document. Okay? That's the old school, by the way. In case you didn't know what that was. All right, so once we start interacting with that machine, we decide we want to go to that live response process. All right, it's time we've really got to think. All right, you really got to think before you click. You got to have a plan. You got to have a process. You got to have a methodology. You got to be not distracted. This is definitely not one of those times where you should be doing 3 things at once. All right, you need to get have all the tools there that you're going to need, all the documentation you're going to need, all the resources that you need, and all the distractions eliminated when you start this process. Because once you start it, you only get one bite at that apple, if you will. So you want to make sure everything that you're going to do, think it out, think before you click. Don't just start clicking around and poking around. Have a process and a plan in place before you sit down at that machine. So every click can have a serious consequence in this whole string of events. Okay. So once you start this, again, you do not want to be distracted, and you want to have a clear, thought-out methodology to go forward. So many simple actions on that computer, okay, are going to cause changes to that system, and we all know and understand that. Moving the mouse, touching the keyboard are all going to cause changes, but they probably aren't going to cause changes to the evidence, and that's what's important. All right, talked about this before. As far as the changes go, opening files, virus scans, running backups, all those things can and will modify the evidence and or possibly destroy it. So the key part of this process is documentation. Like I mentioned before, that underpins everything we do from a forensic perspective, but especially here in a live response, because we may have to recreate this 2-3 years from now in a court of law. Or we may have to recreate this 2 or 3 years for another reason. But you're only going to have, your memory's only going to last so long, and the documentation is going to be absolutely critical of exactly what you did and exactly what you saw and exactly what happened. All right, so how do we do this? All right, typically we're going to see photography and notes is how we're going to document our live system response. Sketches, perhaps, and video. Those 4 ways: photographs, notes, sketching, and video. All right. What you want to do is once you start to interact with that machine, you're going to start, you want to note the date and time, and then you want to note everything that you do. I did this, and the machine did that. I did this, and the machine did that. So attention to the detail. What are you actually seeing on the screen? Exactly. What are the running processes? What's open? Document these things in as much detail as you can. You can never really get too much detail. So attention to the detail is the key. Anytime you're going to photograph things on the screen, better have a high-resolution camera. Get a high number of megapixels. Okay, get the high-resolution camera. It's going to be helpful. Photograph the screen before and after. Every move that you make, photograph it before. Make your move. Photograph the result. Again, document every step that you take. Every window that you close, everything that you minimize, every click, document it. And what the result is. So action, the effect or result. I did this, the machine or system did that. All right? It may be nothing, it may have closed the window, but again, the details of what's going to matter down the road. All right? The details going to matter down the road. I did this, and the machine did that. Avoid unnecessary clicks. What could be one significant problem here? What if you come across? How many of you guys have Windows systems in your organizations? Probably everybody. How many of you guys have Linux? How many of you guys have Apple? Okay. How many of you guys are not familiar with one of those 3? You guys are all up to speed on all of it? Well, it's good. What happens if you're not? You don't know how to gracefully shut down a particular version of Linux or an Apple machine. You'd be poking, you'd be clicking all over the place. Where's this? How do you close these windows? Where's my X? If you look at Apple, for example, if you close Windows window, where is it? Upper right, X. Where is it on an Apple machine?
Left.
Upper left. It's 3 dots. It's a red, a yellow, and a green. Right? How do you close a program in a Windows machine? Basically, you just close the X in the application window, right? Close the whole thing, and that shuts it down. So on an Apple computer, if I've got PowerPoint up and I close the red dot on the window, does that mean the application is closed? No, not. So a lot of folks may not know that. So you've got to be familiar. You need to be familiar with all the systems in your network, all right, that you may come across. So this is going to avoid these unnecessary clicks you have to hunt and find the various switches and buttons to push, right? So, goals, we want to collect the RAM, collect the volatile memory, all right? Preserve the evidence the best we can, all right? Again, we want to go in there up front knowing what are we after. What kind of evidence or what kind of data are we after? So we know where to look and how to preserve it. We want to do a graceful shutdown. Why do we want a graceful shutdown? What's one of the other problems with just yanking the power? What can that do?
Corrupt files.
Say again?
Right cache.
Write cache, all right. And what else? What else can that do? Corrupt the drive, you have a database, could do pins. Bad things can happen when you have a sudden interruption of power, right? So you can cause corruption and data destruction. So ideally, by doing this graceful shutdown, we're going to avoid the risk of the various problems we just discussed.
What if there's something set to clear up stuff on shutdown?
It's possible, but how are you going to know that in advance?
I thought that's part of why you pulled the plug.
It is. It could be. But how often is that? I mean, that's one of those, what's more likely? You're never going to find a perfect scenario. You know what I mean? I mean, if you got reason to believe that that registry key is set, that nuke on shut down or whatever, then that's, if you got reason to believe it, then sure. But I think a lot of times you got to go with the more likely than not scenario. I think.
How about a what's called ACPI shutdown? The thing where you hold the power button in for a couple of seconds. Machine shuts down quickly, but it doesn't corrupt any files. Now, are those?
I don't know that that's any different than pulling the plug.
What about forcing like a sleep mode? Because then or hibernation, because then you'd actually you'd be writing a file to disk, but you'd be preserving memory.
In most cases, you want to go at you have to figure out what you want to go after before you shut it down. So, say for example, you want to go after IE or Firefox artifacts. It would be silly to go through a graceful shutdown, because if I do that, if they're running in private browsing, then it's going to clear out all that cache. If I do pull the plug, then I want to make sure to pull the plug from the back of the machine. So, but I can also look on the other end of that. If they're running BitLocker or even BitLocker to go, and I pull the plug, then I might put myself in a scenario where I'm looking at full disk encryption now. As something that if I did a graceful shutdown, I may be able to bypass. So there's so many scenarios you have to take in play here. What kind of evidence do I want, and what kind of shutdown is going to yield those particular results? I've been, in 15 different scenarios of that before. I can tell you every one has a different expected result. So.
Yep. Absolutely. Thanks, Doc. Do as quick as possible. Doing your homework in advance, understanding how these various systems work and how to shut them down to get that fewest clicks possible, very important. Complete documentation. Complete documentation, exactly what did you do and what was the result. All right, there is the better your documentation is, the arguing down the road gets very, very moot. All right, you're going to know what you did and what happened. All right, any questions on any of that? Anybody done this before? How was it? Interesting. Did you run into any of these different scenarios, or?
Yeah, we had to pull a live system out of the current running system in the DMZ that was supporting critical applications. So we do a full live mirror of it in running time, and then do friends on top of that.
Wow. Did you get trained in that first? Do you have the?
I mean, we have basic SANs like forensic training, or basic there was a specific Linux system, so like the Linux SANs class were allowed, and it's just normal system administration, how to take a mirror and image without changing up.
Yeah, man, that's the way it usually works. You're going to see some stuff like that to where you've never seen it before, done it, and you're lucky if you have. So that's good. Anybody else?
Luckily, never had to go anywhere.
Anybody else? Any lessons learned out of that?
Just document aggregation and the control of the evidence. Make sure you have it. Make sure you have it up to use.
What kind of documentation? Did they give you any feedback on what they expected, or what was did they give you any brief or anything?
I had a reserving state. It was okay. So I made sure all financial records is available. So many years back.
Well, not bad. Good.
So I used the backups.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Anybody ever had a case involving this kind of topic, but a case involving backup tapes from antiquated systems? Wasn't really. Yeah, that gets to be exciting. In my old gig in the private world, we used eBay quite a bit. We had systems like that where the hardware and software weren't made anymore. So what do? The only way to get that data back, get the hardware and software, and the only source for us was eBay. So we actually got that stuff in there, so that could be a lifesaver there.
So what happens if, so legally, are you allowed to run tools while it's live to do like the memory collection? Does that affect anything if you're allowed to or not?
I think it depends on, you need more detail, I think, as far as exactly,
Okay, so you can, a lot of the tools that just came out that'll pull like credentials if a machine is locked. A lot of times you come up to a machine, it's probably going to be in a locked state, but it's already logged in. And I'm thinking if you went up to it and you plugged in one of these different tools that would pull like all the cookies or pull all the credentials that are in memory currently, even though it's locked, would that be okay to do before you shut it down, or would that cause too much disruption?
I think it's going to depend a lot on the context. I think it's going to depend a lot on your documentation. It's going to depend a lot on the lawyer on the other side and their experts. I mean, is the process and procedure that you're using, is it an acceptable forensic practice? Is it somewhere written down by somebody else that that's how you do it?
Have you ever heard of like forensic team using responder per se?
Yeah, that's
in a
exactly where I'm
actual
going.
case? Yeah,
Yeah.
this is relatively. I would say it's not newer, but it's a relatively publicly newer use.
Because if you come across a machine, I was thinking it'd be awesome. You plug that in, you've now got the credentials to log in. Well, if they have all these, they're logged in as themselves, and they have all these browsing tabs, depending on what the case is probably going to be about, you could tweak that list to grab all of the cookies and login creds for all the other sites that you're expecting that this person may have gone to. And now you have all their login credentials for that. But you're now really modifying a lot of the hard drive because you're asking for the cookies.
It goes back to what are you changing and why are you changing it? Can you show that you've used that minimally invasive technique? Did you have an option? And again, here's where it gets weird because you've got so many jurisdictions. You've got so many different judges, so many different lawyers involved in this, and so many different experts. It all depends on, in my mind, how well the other side is going to be able to craft the argument that you were reckless, that you were using a technique that has never been done before. So you were so far out on the bleeding edge that you were putting all that evidence at risk. And it depends on how well that other side is going to be able to articulate that. If you've got something in your back pocket that, I went to a training class by this group, Sammons, Marshall, wherever, and this is how they told me to do it, you're better off than you are if you're out on the bleeding edge and you're on your own. But not to say that you could be right. It may never come up. It's going to depend on the other side. There's so many variables involved in a court. You know what I mean? It's a lot of that comes down to the advocates, the lawyers on either side. Because if anybody's been to court more than twice, knows that what's the truth and what's legal, those things aren't in the same zip code, right? All depends on the lawyer. So they can make an argument that you rescuing the Pope was a bad idea. Depending on the jury, that may get traction. But so it all depends on. You can only do all you can do. There's a certain limit to what you can do.
But have you guys seen that responder or say conduit or something used in a forensic capability?
I've not. Have you heard? Have you?
Well, I mean, I've seen defense experts being brought in from an IR perspective before, and the first thing that I'm going to do as a hired expert, because I usually don't take on defense casework, but if I take on a prosecution casework, I'm going to look at their methodology first, and I'm going to challenge their methodology. So if you have an expert that is going to go through cookies, and let's just say they need to get into a system, so they're going to, run a process or whatever. It doesn't matter. But let's just say they want to image the system. And I went up against a defense expert one time where the method that they used to image the hard drive was Norton Ghost. Okay, well, that's not a forensically accepted practice. We use forensic imaging techniques. So that's the first thing I'm feeding the prosecutor. Okay, challenge them on this technique. Even though this is used in the IT side of the woods, this is not something that we do every day on the forensic end. This is not an accepted practice in the community. And the evidence was ultimately thrown out because of that, because they did not stick to acceptable practices in our community. And that's where you want to start picking up training. You want to start networking with people, figuring out what the courts are championing through as far as acceptable procedure. Because there's a ton of things. I can pop a land turtle in and get a shell, and I can get cookies, and I can do all this. But ultimately, when I go to court, it's not my lab's reputation on the line. It's my reputation on the line, and I'm not putting my reputation on the line to get a couple of extra nuggets of evidence. Sorry. I'm not doing that, because you're going to take the fall for it, and the lab's going to be like, whoa, hang on here. We didn't accept you to do that. So that's, take it or leave it as is, but at the end of the day, it's our personal reputation, professional reputation we have to maintain. So know your processes.
And the scary thing is that how quick does technology change? It's a light speed. How quick does the law change? It moves like the Titanic, right? So you've got something that's moving at the speed of light, being more or less controlled by something that moves at the speed of the Titanic, right? So you run into those situations like that to where that you may have a piece of technology in a given context or situation that there is no accepted best practice because nobody's taught a class on it, nobody's wrote a book on it, nobody's done research on it yet. So the question there, what I might suggest there is before you do it, if you got some advance notice and you got some time, test it. And that's one of the things they're going to look at is, did you test it before you did it? If you didn't do it and you had the time, why did you do that? That would seem to be reasonable. That whole reasonable word is one thing the courts really love, is what would a reasonable person do? A lot of that's a word that is commonly used. Great questions. Who else? There's no easy one-size-fits-all to this stuff, and it varies, again, jurisdiction to jurisdiction and technology to technology, and it changes all the time. It's very important also to get your policies and procedures up to snuff and make sure that you're following those, because that's one of the things they're going to look at too. Like Josh said, he's going to look at the methodologies, but also one of the things I would look at is does that organization have a policy and procedure governing live response? What does it say? Because all that's going to be discoverable. If we're going to court, I'm going to ask you for your policy. It's part of what I would ask for in discovery would be the other side's policy and procedure covering that. And did they violate their own? Do they even have one? If they don't have one, that's a red flag right there. That's going to be a problem. All right? So all those things come into play. It's a big, complicated, very labor-intensive, time-consuming thing to get all this stuff right. Big stuff. All right, that's all I got. Thank you much.